Welcome to Hockey Whiz Talks podcast. Today I'll be talking about the best modern day NHL rivalries. In this podcast, I'll be talking about three of the biggest NHL rivalries right now. Chicago Blackhawks versus St. Louis Blues. Since 1970, the Chicago Blackhawks and St. Louis Blues have been in the same division. It is the most intense rivalry in terms of penalty minutes and fighting. At the height of the rivalry, during the Norris Division days, it was common to go to a Chicago vs. St. Louis game and see a brawl break out. Since the move of the Detroit Red Wings to the Eastern Conference, this rivalry is considered a top divisional rivalry for both teams. They have qualified for the playoffs together every season from 1980 to 1997, with every Norris Division final from 1982 to 1993 involving either Chicago or St. Louis, or both teams except 1987 when the Detroit Red Wings faced the Toronto Maple Leafs. The rivalry caught fire in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when both teams had well-known stars such as Jeremy Roenick, Chris Chelios, and Ed Belfour for the Hawks, and Brett Hull, Adam Oates, and Vincent Rendu for the Blues. Additionally, both teams played in old arenas, St. Louis Arena and Chicago Stadium respectively, that were regarded as two of the loudest arenas in the league. Additionally, all six brothers would either play for the Blackhawks or Blues. In fact, left winger Darryl and Brian spent their entire careers with Chicago and St. Louis respectively. Perhaps the defining moment of the 1990-91 season came in a brawl during a 6-4 Chicago Blackhawks win over the Blues on March 17, 1991. The game came to be known as the St. Patrick's Day Massacre for the massive amount of fighting and penalty minutes handed out to both teams. 12 players and 6 players on each team were ejected, while there was a total of 278 penalty minutes. After reviewing tapes, the NHL suspended Blues defenseman Scott Stevens for 2 games, the Hawks Mike Peluso, and the Blues Kelly Chase each for 10 games, and fined both teams $10,000 each. Fast forward to the early 2010s, where the Hawks and Blues rivalry heats up once again. The Blackhawks beat the Blues in the opening round of the 2014 Stanley Cup playoffs 4-2 after trailing 2-0. They would face each other again in the first round of the 2016 playoffs. After St. Louis jumped out to a 3-1 series lead, Chicago rallied to win Game 5 and 6 to force a Game 7. The Blues won Game 7 3-2 on a goal by former Blackhawk Troy Brouwer. The rivalry has gone quiet now as both teams are trying to rebuild, but when these two teams were constantly facing each other in the playoffs, it was one of the best rivalries in hockey. And now a word from our sponsor. Check out my scouting blog at HockeyWiz777scouting.com. Listen to my scouting blog podcast on podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/HockeyWiz777scouting. Vegas Golden Knights versus San Jose Sharks. This is the newest major rivalry in the NHL. The San Jose Sharks finished at the bottom of the division in both of the first 2 seasons in the league. In the 1993-94 season, they qualified for the playoffs, and in that postseason, the Sharks shocked the world to upset the top-seeded Detroit Red Wings to win their first ever playoff series in 7 games in what is one of the biggest playoff upsets in history. Starting from the 1997-98 campaign, the team began a streak of 5 consecutive postseason appearances. However, they never made it past the semifinals. The Sharks' history of playoff disappointments reached an apex in the 2013-14 season after going up 3-0 on the rival Los Angeles Kings in the first round of the 2014 playoffs. To make matters worse, the Kings would go on to win the Stanley Cup that year. The 2015-16 season saw the San Jose Sharks win their first ever conference title, but would eventually lose to the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Stanley Cup Finals. The following year, the Sharks were eliminated by the St. Louis Blues in the Western Conference Finals. This is where the Vegas Golden Knights enter the picture as the new expansion team in the NHL for the 2017-18 season. Vegas shocked everyone with how successful they were in that first season, putting up a 51-24-7 record, good for 109 points, and first place in the Pacific Division. Not only did they have outstanding regular season success, the Golden Knights blew through the Western Conference en route to a Stanley Cup Finals appearance with the Washington Capitals, where they were ultimately bested in 5 games. The rivalry against the Sharks began in that postseason against the San Jose Sharks in their second round matchup. The Golden Knights completely embarrassed the Sharks in Game 1 and won Game 2 in double overtime 4-0. Vegas struck back to take Game 3 in overtime by the same score of 4-3. San Jose won Game 4 behind a shutout from Martin Jones. With the series tied at 2, Vegas won Game 5 5-3, which took the series to a pivotal Game 6, where Vegas ultimately took the series in 6 games behind a Marc-Andre Fleury shutout. The rivalry escalated the following season in 2019, where the Sharks and Golden Knights met again in the playoffs. This series was highlighted by the Joe Pavelski injury-dominated Game 7, which featured 4 power play goals being scored by the Sharks during that 5-minute major penalty, which was assessed to Cody Eakin for cross-checking Joe Pavelski. The Sharks came back from a 3-goal deficit to win the game and the series in overtime 5-4. The cross-checking penalty was very controversial and increased the rivalry between the two teams. An extra spicy layer to this rivalry, who was the coach of the San Jose Sharks from May of 2015 to December of 2019, was hired in 2020 to replace Gerard Gallant as the head coach of the Vegas Golden Knights. The rivalry pretty much died down, now with the majority of players involved in these playoff matchups on different teams or retired. In addition, San Jose is now in full rebuild mode, so they are not a threat to Vegas anymore. For a good 2 to 4 years, this rivalry was really good and was arguably one of the best modern day NHL rivalries. Check out my hockey blog at hockeywithtalkshockey.blogspot.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at hockeywith777. Dallas Stars versus Colorado Avalanche. The Colorado Avalanche and Dallas Stars have competed since the franchise's days as the Quebec Nordiques and Minnesota North Stars. But the rivalry intensified once the teams relocated in the 1990s and soon battled for championships. The Avalanche Nordique franchise lead the all-time series 69-51-21, including posting a 46-33-17 mark since moving to Denver. Since the 1995-96 campaign, the franchises have met 4 times in the postseason, featuring Hall of Famers such as Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, and Patrick Roy for Colorado, and Mike Modano, Brett Hull, and Ed Belfour for Dallas. The first 2 playoff series came in the Western Conference Finals in back-to-back years in 1999 and 2000, which resulted in Dallas defeating Colorado in 7 games both times. The second consecutive series loss to the Stars lit a fire under the Avalanche to inspire their team. Colorado went 2-0-1-1 against the Stars the following season in 2000-2001 with a 52-16-10-4 record for a total of 118 points before winning its second Stanley Cup championship since moving to Denver. The Avalanche and Stars met again in the first round of the playoffs, but this time, Colorado quickly dismissed the Stars in 5 games, as Avalanche goalie David Abisher held the Stars to 2 or fewer goals in all 4 wins. Then in 2006, the Avalanche prevailed again over the Stars, also in 5 games, as Joe Sakic recorded 7 points in the series. The Dallas Stars got payback in 2020 in the bubble when they defeated Colorado in their second round matchup. With the Avalanche and Stars now in the same Central Division, fighting for divisional supremacy, it should once again reignite their old rivalry. Looking at the standings right now, the Stars and Avalanche are poised to face each other in the first round of the playoffs, which would reignite their rivalry once again. Listen to Hockey Wiz Talks podcast on Podbean and Spotify. Check out my travel channel at youtube.com/HockeyWizTravels. In my next podcast, I'll be previewing the first round of the 2023 Stanley Cup playoffs.